You don't need revenge, you need self-respect. And these 5 silent moves, they flip the power dynamic without games, without drama, and without a single word. She thought you'd always be there. She thought your love was free. But now she's shocked. Because you're not playing anymore. And when she realizes what she lost, it's already too late. Comment: I am the prize. Number 1. Disappear from her world. She only begins to value presence when it's gone, but not the kind of absence where you post a quote, vanish for a week, then show up again, hoping she notices, not the kind where you give her breadcrumbs to track you down. No. The kind of absence that makes her feel like she never truly knew you. That moment she tries to call and the line doesn't connect. That second she scrolls through old messages and your last words feel colder than silence itself. That minute when her ego tells her you'll come back, and every passing hour proves that assumption wrong, because when you disappear from her world without a sound, without drama, without flinching, you become the ghost that haunts her every interaction. Not because she misses what you gave her, but because she can't recreate it with anyone else. And while she scrolls through her options, hoping one of them makes her feel the way you did, deep down she knows none of them will measure up, because none of them endured her indifference. None of them showed up consistently when she offered inconsistency. None of them stayed when she pushed and loved harder when she pulled away. And when you finally stop reaching, stop reminding her that you exist, she starts noticing the silence, not because she loves you suddenly, but because the control is gone, the power is shattered, the comfort of knowing you'll return, no matter how many times she emotionally mistreats you, is replaced with a deafening awareness that she never had you under control at all. And that absence. It becomes her greatest teacher, not through force, but through stillness, because she expected chaos, and you gave her peace. She expected rage, and you gave her disappearance. She expected confrontation, and you gave her your back turned to the future, while she stands in the past trying to replay memories she no longer deserves. And it's not about making her chase. It's about understanding that no one who respects you will ever make you earn their attention with silence, and no one who values you will ever need to be taught a lesson. So you don't disappear to provoke emotion. You disappear to recover yours. You vanish, not to create longing, but to create space for clarity, to detach not only physically, but mentally, spiritually, emotionally, to no longer orbit someone who's been emotionally checked out, playing games, testing limits, waiting to see how far they can push you until you finally snap. And when you don't snap but instead detach, you make the most powerful move a person can make. You protect your peace without announcement, because closure is for those who want a door to remain slightly open. But you don't leave doors open for someone who repeatedly walked out on you without even looking back. You burn no bridges because there are no bridges where there's no respect. And when you cut the cord completely, not emotionally limping back in a week, not hoping for them to check your page, not asking mutual friends if they said anything, but completely cut, you begin the process of freeing yourself, because the moment you let go, you start seeing everything more clearly. The disrespect you tolerated, the boundaries you ignored, the self-worth you buried beneath your obsession to prove you were good enough. And now that you're gone, really gone, she starts realizing she wasn't prepared for it. She thought she'd have you forever, because she thought forever lived in her control, not your standards. And now she's left with only questions and regret, wondering what changed. And that confusion eats away at her confidence in a way no angry words ever could. But that only works if you stay gone, if you resist the need to be seen, if you silence the need for revenge, if you starve the part of you that craves her realization, and instead feed the version of you that walks forward with purpose. Because stoic living means not reacting when disrespected. It means rebuilding without announcement. It means walking away without needing anyone to follow. And when you do this, when you disappear from her world completely and start becoming someone who values peace over proximity, discipline over attention, solitude over forced connection, she begins to feel the weight of your absence, not because you're punishing her, but because she's finally experiencing the reality she created when she assumed you'd never walk away. And while she rewatches old messages, remembering your tone, the way you spoke life into her when no one else did, she'll want to reach out. But she'll hesitate because she doesn't know who you are anymore, and that uncertainty, that fear, that space between who you were and who you've become, it becomes the wall she can't climb, because you built it with time, with silence, with detachment, not out of pain, but out of clarity. And when you disappear correctly, it's not just a move. It's a transformation, one that reshapes not just your relationship with her, but your relationship with yourself. Because the man who truly disappears doesn't hide. He reemerges on a higher level with new standards, new strength, new calm, and she'll know she can't reach him anymore, not because she lost access to his attention, but because she lost access to his soul, and that is the regret she'll carry long after the silence settles. But while she sits in the memory of what she lost, you step into the future of who you're becoming, and if you're ready to build that version of you, the grounded, powerful, untouchable version who never has to beg, chase, or explain again, then it's time to go deeper than just understanding this mindset. It's time to live it, and that's exactly what the Stoic Relationship Blueprint was created for. Not just a book, but a lifelong manual filled with timeless principles that don't just speak to your situation. They redefine who you are inside it. And now that it's finally available in audiobook, you can absorb every hard-earned truth while you're walking, training, driving, reflecting, and every single time you hit play, you're not just listening, you're becoming, because this knowledge isn't temporary. It's yours forever. And once it's in you, no one can take it from you. Not her, not the past, not the pain. So scroll down, click the link in the comments, grab the audiobook now, and make sure the next chapter of your life is built on wisdom so strong, no one will ever take you for granted again. Number 2. Work until she doesn't recognize you. She expects you to collapse, to stall, to wait for her to notice your worth. She expects you to spiral into distraction, to pretend you're unaffected while secretly checking her story views, to post vague captions, hoping she'll understand you're hurting and come back. She expects you to replace her with another version of her instead of replacing her with purpose. And that's why your greatest act of self-respect is to rise so relentlessly that by the time she thinks of coming back, she no longer belongs in your life. Because if the version of you who tolerated breadcrumbs continues to exist after she leaves, then you haven't changed. You've just paused. And growth doesn't come from waiting. It comes from rebuilding so ferociously that the man she once thought she could manipulate becomes a stranger she no longer qualifies to know. And while she's out proving she can live without you, you're proving to yourself that you should have started living long before she left. And the moment you accept that closure is your responsibility, not her job to give, you begin the climb, not to impress her, not to send a signal, but to redeem every version of yourself that accepted less than you deserve. Because the grind isn't about revenge, it's about clarity. It's about waking up at 5 a.m., not because it's trendy, but because you've had enough of seeing potential in your own reflection that never gets realized. It's about working so hard on your body, mind, discipline, finances, habits, that you finally become the man who never would have tolerated her behavior in the first place. And while she's flirting for attention, you're reading, you're lifting, you're investing, you're creating systems, not stories. And in this silence, something shifts, because the same woman who once ignored your effort is now watching from the shadows, confused by your lack of reaction, disturbed by your peace, jealous of the world you're building without her, because growth exposes the gap, and when you rise, She sees just how small she played you, and while she's pretending to be unfazed, deep down she's comparing every man to you, but not the you she left, the you who was reborn the moment you stopped chasing and started constructing, and you build. Not because you're angry, but because you're tired of being a spectator in your own life. You build because your energy now belongs to purpose, not to people who misuse it. You build because every hour wasted waiting for a text back could have been invested into your legacy, and she starts to realize that you've gone from someone who needed her validation to someone she needs validation from, and that shift is permanent when your growth becomes detached from outcome, when it's no longer about what she thinks or whether she regrets, but about whether you're finally proud of the man you see in the quiet moments when no one's watching, and you focus on inputs, not applause, on execution, not reaction. And this isn't a game of who posts the best story. It's a transformation from within, and she won't see you at the club. She won't hear about you from mutuals, because you've moved past everything that kept you stuck in emotional debt. And when she finally sees you, maybe months later, maybe longer, she sees a man she doesn't recognize. Not because you're pretending to be something new, but because you've returned to what you were always meant to be before you let validation make you soft, before you let comfort make you average. And your glow-up isn't just physical, it's spiritual, it's intellectual, it's the peace in your eyes, the direction in your step, the decisiveness in your choices, the refusal to entertain chaos in any form, and every area of your life becomes structured, refined, untouchable. And the more you upgrade your life, the clearer it becomes that she was never the prize. The prize was always the version of you she distracted you from becoming. And now that you're back, there's no room for her in this chapter, not because you hate her, but because you're operating in an altitude she can't breathe in. And while she lingers in the same social circles, trying to recreate the attention she used to drown in, you're too focused on your schedule to even glance back. Because regret is loud when your success is quiet. And there comes a moment when she sees your name and hesitates to click. Not because she's busy, but because she's anxious. Anxious that you've outgrown her. Anxious that she no longer has a hold. And she's right, because the man who once waited for her text now writes his own schedule, controls his own attention, and no longer settles for emotional scraps from people who are full of themselves but empty of value. And this transformation starts with discipline, not feelings, with routines, not reactions, with habits, not hope. And you build every single day, even when it hurts, especially when it's lonely, because the weight of growth is lighter than the regret of staying small for someone who never planned to grow with you. And as your life compounds, your finances stabilize, your fitness elevates, your communication sharpens, your time becomes sacred. She realizes you're no longer the man she dismissed. You're now the standard she can't meet, and the pain of being replaced is nothing compared to the realization that she never even knew the real you. She only knew the version that tolerated her games, the version that explained his feelings, that fought for a place in her life. But now you don't even explain your absence. You don't defend your choices. You don't hint that you've moved on. You just live, you just grow, you just build. And the man who builds relentlessly is the man no one forgets. Not because he begs to be remembered, but because he becomes impossible to replace. And in the quiet of her room, scrolling through what was, what could have been, she feels the reality most never admit, that the one she took for granted is now the one she'll never reach again, not because you made her feel guilty, but because you made yourself unavailable in every way that mattered. And that's what transformation does. It removes access from those who misused it and reserves your energy for the life you're finally ready to build. And when you work until she doesn't recognize you, you don't just evolve, you transcend. Number 3, stop explaining yourself. Every time you explain yourself to someone who already made up their mind about you, you give them more power over your peace. You feed their ego with your reasoning. You keep the door open to manipulation under the disguise of understanding. And in the process, you betray the part of you that already knows the truth, because a person who truly respects you doesn't need explanations for your standards, and a person who doesn't respect you will never understand your explanations anyway. And so you enter a cycle where you keep trying to justify why you feel hurt, why you pulled away, why you changed, why you're acting differently. And every time you do, you reinforce the belief that your value must be negotiated, that your boundaries must be explained, that your worth must be proven. And this is where the slow death of your self-respect begins. Not in the argument itself, but in the internal betrayal of saying, maybe if I explain it better, they'll finally understand. But they don't, because they're not confused, they're indifferent. They hear your long message not as an expression of hurt, but as confirmation that you still care, that they still have control, and the more you talk, the more they tune out. And now your words don't land, they leak. Your energy spills out in the form of paragraphs, long voice notes, emotional breakdowns trying to make someone see what they're intentionally avoiding. And when someone pretends not to get it, it's not your job to educate them. It's your job to withdraw, not because you're weak, but because your silence is the final lesson that needs no class, no syllabus, no discussion. And the moment you stop explaining, they start realizing, not in that dramatic moment you expected, but in the long silence that follows. In the quiet when they notice your name hasn't popped up, when they expected a reaction and it never came, when they start playing back your last words and wonder why they didn't respond differently. But by then, you're not there to hear it, because the man who explains himself is still seeking connection, while the one who stops explaining is building detachment. And this isn't about being cold, it's about being clear. It's about accepting that no matter how good your intentions, your words won't reach someone who's committed to misunderstanding you. And so you shift the energy from talking to transforming, from reacting to recalibrating, from needing to be understood to being at peace with being misjudged, because real power is found in letting people believe what they want, while you quietly become everything they didn't expect. And as you stop justifying, you start healing, because the urge to explain is often rooted in pain, in the desire to be seen, to be validated, to prove that you're not the villain they made you out to be. But the truth is, they knew your heart and chose to disregard it. They knew your effort and still disrespected it. And if someone can watch you suffer and still need a breakdown of your emotions to act right, they were never going to value you anyway. And the sooner you accept that, the faster you stop rehearsing conversations in your head, crafting replies to messages that never come, wondering how to word your truth in a way that finally lands, because you realize your truth doesn't need to land, it just needs to be lived. And once you stop explaining yourself, everything shifts. People who once toyed with your attention feel the weight of your absence, not because you slammed a door, but because they expected an essay and received silence, and it shakes them, not immediately, but deeply, because silence holds them accountable in ways words never could, and you now use your words where they matter, on your goals, on your craft, on your daily habits, on building a life so structured and grounded that even if they came back, they wouldn't know where to fit in, and you let your actions speak in languages your explanations never could, because nothing says, "I meant what I said," like not repeating it. Nothing says, "I'm done," like moving in silence. And the person who once expected you to plead now sits in confusion, not understanding how you detached so cleanly, how you stopped arguing, stopped messaging, stopped showing up to the emotional tug-of-war. And it's because you learned what stoic living teaches, that peace is preserved not through control, but through boundaries, that emotions are not weapons or tools for negotiation, but signals that show you where to stop giving access, and you stop giving access by saying nothing, by not clarifying your withdrawal, by not breaking your silence with a desperate final message. And as time passes, they sit with your stillness, and it echoes louder than your words ever could, because the man who stops explaining is the man who has outgrown the audience he once tried to impress. And you stop performing not because the show is over, but because the stage no longer deserves your presence. And when they realize this, when the confusion turns to curiosity and curiosity turns to regret, they'll try to circle back, to get you to explain just once more, to give them a roadmap through your silence. But you won't, not out of spite, but out of evolution, because you no longer argue with people who disrespected you while you were honest, who laughed while you opened your heart, who dismissed you while you tried to be better, and now that you're better, they no longer get a front row seat. And the cost of mistreating you is now the inability to access you, not just in conversation, but in thought, in presence, in life, and your silence becomes the boundary they never saw coming, the sentence they never got to read, the ending they never received closure for, and it leaves them wondering, guessing, regretting, because the moment you stop explaining yourself is the moment they start explaining to themselves why they lost someone who was once so patient, so giving, so understanding, and that mental loop is their karma, not because you wished it, but because you let go of needing them to get it, and now the only person who needs to understand your truth is you, and you do, and you live it, daily, in your discipline, your routines, your emotional control, your inner stillness. And as you continue walking forward, the need to explain fades, replaced by peace, and that peace is now permanent because you no longer need to be heard. You've already listened to yourself. Number 4, set boundaries without words. She doesn't take your words seriously when they come after tolerating disrespect, when they follow nights of you letting things slide, when you said, "This is the last time," but still showed up anyway, when you threatened to walk away but never moved your feet, because your energy teaches louder than your language. And the more you explain your boundaries, the more you reveal that they're flexible, that they're up for debate. And when someone senses your lines are made of words and not action, they start testing you not to understand you, but to measure how much they can get away with. And when they learn, there are no consequences. You lose respect, not just from them, but from yourself. And this is how most people end up feeling resentful in relationships. Not because someone crossed a line once, but because they crossed it repeatedly and were allowed to return as if nothing happened. And you try to fix this by talking more, by writing essays, by repeating yourself. But boundaries don't work when you keep announcing them and never enforcing them. They only begin to matter when you stop talking and start acting. When the first time they raise their voice at you is the last time they hear yours. When the first time they flirt with disrespect is the last time they see you smile. When the first time they minimize your standards is the last time they have access to your energy, and you don't slam doors, you don't scream, you don't post quotes or explain how you're tired. You just stop showing up, because the most powerful shift in your life happens when people don't hear from you anymore after they chose to test you. And while they try to figure out what went wrong, you're already investing your time into people and places where your values are the foundation, not the debate, because boundaries are not a threat. They're a quiet promise to yourself that you no longer betray your own peace for the sake of keeping others comfortable. And when someone violates that peace, you don't teach them. You leave them to their own chaos, and you never wait around to see if they get it. You don't need their understanding to make a decision that serves your growth, because if they respected you, they wouldn't need to be taught how to treat you, and if they didn't respect you, they won't learn now that they've gotten away with it for so long. So you don't try to turn it into a teachable moment. You turn it into an exit, and that's what sets you apart from the version of you who tolerated dysfunction, the version of you who kept hoping they'd change. Because now you realize that trying to convince someone to value what you bring is the same as begging to be seen. And you don't beg, not because of ego, but because of evolution. Because you finally understand that some people only understand distance, and some people only realize what they had when it's gone and unrecoverable. And so you remove yourself not to punish but to protect, not to prove a point, but to make peace, not to be dramatic but to be done. And the moment they feel that stillness, that loss of access, that shift where you don't chase, don't explain, don't react, they either spiral into confusion or wake up too late. Because when you set a boundary without warning and they notice everything has changed, they learn that your standards are not conditional, they're absolute. And this doesn't make you cold, it makes you clear, it makes you unshakable, and people feel that in ways that no amount of talking ever could. And yes, they might call you distant, unemotional, overreacting, but all of that is noise from someone who benefited when you had no boundaries. And your job is not to make your peace palatable to people who destroyed it. Your job is to keep moving, to keep building, to keep honoring the decisions that protect your mental clarity, because the man who enforces his boundaries without words becomes impossible to manipulate. And manipulation only works when you keep rewarding bad behavior with second chances, and you're done with second chances for people who knew better the first time. And the way you maintain that is by never looking back, by never reopening closed doors, by staying grounded in your path no matter how much they try to pull you back into explanation. And they will try. They'll come with apologies, with guilt, with memories. But none of that matters now, because the relationship died when they crossed the line without consequence. And you can't resurrect something that's already been poisoned. So you walk away, you heal in silence, you grow in silence, you love yourself in ways that make their access irrelevant. And while they're still watching, still waiting for a signal that you're open to a conversation, they'll learn that people with boundaries don't send signals, they send silence. And that silence becomes sacred. Number 5. Replace her with peace. She expects you to fall apart when she walks away, expects you to chase closure, to react in anger, to spiral into reaction mode trying to make sense of her silence. But what she never expects is your peace. Not the kind that's forced or faked for display, but the kind that's earned in solitude, built through discipline, formed in reflection. And when you replace her with peace, you don't just move on. You transcend the emotional leash she thought you'd stay tied to, because while she's out searching for attention, using validation to numb her own emptiness, you're building a life that doesn't include the need for her recognition, and that disarms her more than any revenge plan ever could, because her real power wasn't in her presence, it was in your emotional dependence on her. And the moment you cut that dependence, the game ends, and you walk out of it, not to find someone new, but to finally find yourself. And when that shift happens, she starts to feel the absence she never believed would exist. She starts to check your page not to admire your glow-up, but to confirm whether or not you've really let go. And when all she sees is silence, focus, growth, direction, when she realizes you're not posting subliminals, not clapping back, not proving anything, she realizes the grip she had is gone, and it doesn't come back, because peace is not something you rent, it's something you build. And once you've built it, anyone who threatens it doesn't belong near it, and she knows that. And now you're not the same man who used to overthink every unread message, who waited for replies like they were oxygen. You've become someone so centered that even her apology wouldn't change the trajectory you're on, because peace teaches you that attention isn't love, that presence isn't partnership, that showing up physically means nothing if it's not matched with consistency. And now you see it clearly. Now you understand that being chosen isn't the same as being respected, that being missed doesn't mean being valued. And so when she starts feeling your distance, when she starts remembering the way you made her feel safe, grounded, steady, She's hit with the reality that she'll never find that again, not because you're unique, but because she broke something in you that can't be repaired. Not out of hate, but out of evolution. Because you don't rebuild bridges to places that robbed you of your peace. And this is where you finally step into your power. Not when you rebound, not when you try to replace her, but when you realize she's not a loss, she's a lesson, and your greatest gain is the self-worth you reclaimed the moment you stopped needing her to see it. And now, instead of chasing validation, you chase vision. Instead of proving yourself, you improve yourself. And that shift creates a life that doesn't respond to chaos. It creates one that radiates order, calm, strength, and it doesn't need to be posted to be real, because you no longer live to be seen, you live to be fulfilled, and fulfillment comes from within, from knowing that peace isn't the absence of problems, but the absence of emotional slavery. And now your mornings are different, not because someone texts you good morning, but because you no longer wake up with anxiety wondering where you stand in someone else's life. You know where you stand, in your lane, in your truth, in your focus. And while she may be out there still playing the same games, still testing the next man's patience, still flirting with instability, you've moved into a state of clarity that makes her irrelevant. And that's the part she can't undo, because she expected you to hate her, expected you to rage, expected you to come back and ask for closure. But you replaced her with peace. And peace doesn't scream, doesn't announce itself. It just sits quietly in the center of your life, protecting everything she once disrupted. And now when she scrolls through old conversations, remembers how you showed up with calm, with care, with presence, she starts feeling the weight of what she threw away. And the difference now is that even if she knocks, there's no door left to open, because the chapter is closed not out of pride, but out of understanding that anything that costs you your peace is too expensive to entertain. And that wisdom becomes your standard, not just for relationships, but for how you do everything. How you pick friends, how you manage your time, how you choose your goals, how you protect your energy. And now every new connection is filtered through one question: does this protect or disrupt my peace? And if the answer isn't clear, you don't engage, because peace is no longer a luxury, it's your default. And this is where you become rare, because most people chase distractions when they're hurt. Most jump into something new to feel seen, but not you. You stay still, you build, you rise, and in that stillness, in that discipline, you find everything you thought someone else would give you: confidence, stability, joy, purpose. And now that it's yours, she's left trying to find someone who gives her what you gave freely, not realizing it wasn't the gifts, it was the giver. And that giver no longer exists in her life. And she feels that now, not in a dramatic breakdown, but in quiet moments when she wishes she could reach out and knows deep down there's nothing left to reach. And your peace becomes the proof, not just that you moved on, but that you healed in a way that doesn't leave space for her return. And that, more than anything, is what makes her regret. They told you to just move on, to be the bigger person, to stay quiet while you're being disrespected. But what they never told you is how to heal with power, walk away with peace, and rebuild with purpose. Society doesn't want you to have this knowledge, because a man who sees clearly is a man they can't control. A man who lives by Stoic principles is untouchable. And that's why the Stoic relationship blueprint isn't just a book. It's the wake-up call you've been denied for too long. And now, with the audiobook finally available, you can carry this clarity with you while walking, training, grinding, absorbing every truth that'll save you years of pain and regrets. This isn't for everyone. It's for the man who's done being played, done being lost, done being silenced. So if you're ready to never be taken for granted again, comment, "I reclaim my peace," like this video, and subscribe to help more men find the truth before it's too late.